people coming out here tonight to hear me. I am an eyewitness to history. I lived it, I have seen it. It will live with me until I die. In 1938, Austria was in a very deep depression. We had 1/3 of our workforce unemployed. We had 25% inflation, and if you would borrow money from the bank, you paid 25% interest. Farmers were going bankrupt, businesses were going bankrupt, nobody had any money, and we had poverty unbelievable. I remember my mother, who was a very good Christian woman, she had a kettle of soup on her stove every day, and we baked bread, and about 30 people a day were knocking on our door for a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. It's not that they didn't want to work. A lot of them were young college students, professionals, everybody. There were no jobs, nothing. The unions were very communistic oriented. They were having strikes, industries closed, factories closed, businesses went out of business, poverty everywhere. What was even worse, we nearly had anarchy. There were two political parties fighting each other. On one side, the National Socialist, Hitler's party, and the other side, the Communist Party, who was getting very strong because they were very, very much with the unions, and street fights and burning down whole blocks of cities. Our police force was totally helpless. They couldn't handle all these fights. So the people of Austria petitioned the government for a plebiscite, an election. And yes, on Palm Sunday, 1938, we elected Hitler by 98% of the vote of the ballot box. Well, when we look to the north, our neighbor, Germany, Hitler ruled there since 1933, and he promised Germany, who they were in the same position as Austria was in 1938. And he promised the people that he would seek employment and they would have a good living standard. And yes, in 1938, Germany had a very good living standard. They had full employment, they had law and order, and everybody was driving that little Volkswagen, you know, the Beetle car. So when we looked to our neighbor to the north, there was just a border between us. We spoke the same language, we had the same culture. The border was like South and North Dakota, and the Austrian people said, why not? We wanted what Hitler promised us. He was going to give us full employment. He was giving back the farms to the farmers, what those usurping banks took away from them. He was giving all the businesses back to the original owner. And he was speaking, oh, he was a great orator. We didn't really know much about him. And he spoke like an American politician. So we got a new government. And nobody was elected anymore. Everybody was appointed from the city commission, county commission, school board, legislature, and governor. And Hitler said Austria had 7 states. We're going to merge the 7 states into 4 states. That would save a lot of money. That way we only would have 4 governors, and that would save us a lot of money. Good idea, we thought. As a lobbyist in South Dakota, I discovered 3 times a bill, a legislation, that they were going to merge our 66 counties into 15. And I thought, oh my, history is repeating itself. And each time I testified before the committee, you are doing the same thing what Hitler did, to merge the 66 counties into 15. Well, that is socialism, because under socialism, it is the most important component to centralize everything, to take away local control. So, the first thing what Hitler gave us, free radios. And then he nationalized all the radio stations. We only had one voice. We didn't dare turn on a foreign radio station like BBC or Switzerland. That was a death penalty. I didn't see any heroes. Then he looted the Jewish banks. He said they are the usurpers. And then he nationalized all our banks. Then he nationalized education. This literally happened overnight. I was 12 years old. I was in 6th grade in public school. We had prayer before class and after class. And the morning I walked, also I would like to say we had religious education twice a week. All this was no more. I walked into my classroom after the election. The crucifix was gone, and there was Hitler's picture and the Nazi flag on both sides. Our teacher said, today we don't pray anymore. We'll sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, the national anthem, and we would not have religious instruction anymore either. We would have physical education instead. We didn't mind that because we had to learn long prayers, very strict. And she also said, on Sunday, that will be National Youth Day. That's compulsory. Your parents will have to send you at 8 o'clock in the morning to go to the gymnasium. And if they don't send you, the first time your parents will get a very stiff letter of warning, the second time a very stiff fine, and the third time your parents will be jailed if they don't send you. So we arrived Sunday morning, instead of going to church, at 8 o'clock in the morning to the gymnasium. The first 2 hours we had political education. Today I would call it political indoctrination. We were told not to listen to our parents. You young people here, listen to your parents. They have the best interest in you. Nobody has more interest in you than your parents. So, when we were told not to listen to our parents, they were old-fashioned old fogies. They didn't understand the young people. Only Hitler did. And we only listen to Hitler from now on, not to our parents. Oh, and the rest of the day we had so much fun. We got all the sports equipment free. We got tennis rackets, we got golf clubs. And the boys of age 16, they got motorcycles. so they could form a motorcycle squad. Not only that, they were taken out to the airfield to fly gliders. You can imagine the end of the day when we returned home and told our parents it was so much fun, we had a good time, much a better time than going to church on Sunday. And we argued with our parents constantly because we had freedom and we had rights. So my mother and my father, they were very disturbed what I was telling. And my mother announced when the next school term started that she was taking me out of this horrible public school and she was going to enroll me in a private school where I would have an excellent curriculum but no fun. Well, she sure did. We arrived there. It was a huge building with an 8-foot wall around and a locked iron gate. When I bid my mother goodbye, I almost hated her. But she was a wise woman. She said, someday when you grow up, you will realize what I'm doing for you. What she did, she saved me from this godless humanism, what was taught in our school system. Today, if she wouldn't have intervened, I would be a radical Marxist. And then, on vacation and holidays, I would go back and visit my old classmates. I did not like what I saw. 16-year-old girls were having babies for Hitler. Oh, Hitler wanted a lot of babies, blonde hair and blue eyes, that he could form a master race. So that was our educational new system. Also, we got all kinds of new laws. And one of those laws was equal rights, the Equal Rights Amendment. Equal rights for women always sounded so good because by tradition in Austria, when a woman got married, she did not work outside of the home. She stayed home, was a good wife, and raised a nice family. And the teachers were very, very perturbed that when a female teacher got married, she had to give up her job for marriage, invested a lot of money in her education, and then she couldn't teach anymore. So they were gung-ho on this Equal Rights Amendment. But there were also two components with the Equal Rights Amendment, socially and economically. Socially, the women had to go out into the workforce. The moms who stayed home to raise a family, they all had to get jobs and were put out in the workforce. What do you think happened to the children? Well, the government had an immediate remedy for that: child care. Child care centers. Well, those child care centers were not the way that we would know how the babysitters, like grandmotherly type. They were highly skilled women in child psychology. You could leave your children there 7 days a week, 24 hours. The longer you left your children there, the better they liked it. So those child caregivers, highly skilled in child psychology, they could mold the little children from early age on exactly how the state wanted them. The other part of the Equal Rights Amendment was economics, to divide the country's wealth by means of escalating the tax structure to give to those who don't have. We had a guaranteed income, and if your income was not of the level what the government decried, then you got subsidies, you got subsidized housing, you got food stamps, you got heating, fuel, you got everything, until everybody was on an equal income level. So our taxes escalated up to 70%. That's socialism. To equalize the country's wealth, to take from those who have and give it to the have-nots. Also, we had naturally a huge welfare system. Everybody was entitled to something. Everybody. Something. It was highly, highly government controlled, the income level for everybody, so that everybody was equal on an income level. We got a new health department. Our healthcare system in Austria before Hitler was excellent. We had excellent doctors. We had very good hospital, and our healthcare was all paid privately by private insurance, and it worked very well. This also changed very, very fast. Everybody was entitled to free health care. My brother-in-law was a family physician. He told me when he would come to his office 8 o'clock in the morning, there were already 40 patients waiting for him. Everybody rushed to the doctor for everything and anything. He said it was like practicing medicine on a conveyor belt. The doctors were all salaried by the government, very tightly controlled. My brother-in-law was a very conscientious doctor. He would prescribe for his patients medication what they really needed. And if the medication, what he prescribed, was not on the government's list, they took it out of his salary, and his salary dwindled down to very little. So many, many doctors left the country, including my own husband. He would not want to practice medicine as his brother had to. And I remember him telling me when he came to the United States, and he was actually in a hospital here in Minneapolis, he marveled at this wonderful modern hospital and the wonderful health care what we have. He said, it is really God-given what America has, this great health care. Let's hope that our health care bill will not get into real action, that we can have by taking back the House, the U.S. House, that they will defeat our new health care law, because it is going to be terrible. And despite our government saying that abortion is not included, oh yes, it will be included. There is absolutely, they have to pay for it. And then we also know by Eugenics that those of us who are on Medicare, we will have a wide surprise what they're going to do. I will get to that later. Also, of course, under socialism, you have a lot of rules and regulation. And one of the rules, we had, what Hitler did, yes, he created a lot of jobs, a lot of public work jobs, more government employees, more bureaucrats, more commissars. That's what we had. And they were writing all the rules and all the regulation. And a lot of it was directed to business. The bureaucrats would go into the businesses and inspect everything and find a lot of faults that they had to replace bathrooms. They had to replace, like in a restaurant, if the tables were square, they had to be rounds because people were bumping themselves on the corners. So they had to replace a lot of it costing a lot of money, and a lot of small businesses went out of business, only the big ones survived. Also, the bureaucrats would go out on the farms and measure the farm fields and tell the farmers what he had to plant and how much he had to harvest regarding to the weather. They were counting the livestock, and the farmers had to turn everything into the food banks and murder the farmer if he would keep a pig for himself. Then he would be jailed. The bureaucrats also went out and counted the chickens and ordered the chickens how many eggs they had to lay. That's socialism. Rules and regulation, everywhere, everywhere. That was the planning agency. And God forbid, we probably will have the same thing here. Everybody will be ruled and regulated. That's what socialism does. Abortions were highly illegal. Of course, Hitler wanted a lot of babies, but we had selected abortions. If one of the parents, if the woman was pregnant and one of the parents were not 100% Aryan, you know, the master race, she was forced to have an abortion. How sad, forcefully giving up your baby because it wouldn't have blue eyes or blonde hair. We also had euthanasia. As my education progressed, in my last year in college, I was sent to a small village in the Alps to do my practice teaching. I was told in that small village they had about 15 mentally handicapped people. They couldn't read or write. They couldn't speak very well, but they were useful citizens. They did a lot of manual work. I know one man very well. He was Vincent, our janitor. He could not speak well. He couldn't read and write, but he was an excellent janitor. One morning, I looked out of my classroom window. There was a van out there from the health department, and all these 15 people were being put into the van. I asked my principal, what are they going to take those people? He said, well, the health department came around to the families and asked them if they would want to institutionalize their son or daughter to learn how to read and write and perhaps learn a trade like basket weaving. Gladly, the parents signed the papers. There was only a little clause that they could not visit them because they might get homesick. So they often went in the van. 6 months later, the letters came to the parents that their son or daughter died a natural but merciful death. The news traveled very fast in that little village. Everybody said, how could that be that they all left in excellent health and they all died within 6 months? How could that happen? Well, it dawned on us that they were being euthanized. Also, I found much later, when I was already over in the United States, that in Austria, 20,000 handicapped children were being euthanized. They were useless mouths to feed. They wanted only perfect people. nobody handicapped. Be very careful. I will never get a handicapped license plate, no matter what. I will not want to be on the list. Hitler had lists on everybody. We also had a federal police force, commonly known as the Gestapo. They were everywhere. They were in civilian clothes. They watched everybody. And it went something like this. If somebody died in your family, grandma, everybody, we had to have ration cards. All our food were being rationed. And when grandmother died, by law, you were supposed to turn in her ration card, but you wanted that 1 pound of sugar, what we got a month, that coveted pound of sugar. You went to the grocery shop right away, and you bought that pound of sugar. The next day, the Gestapo would knock on your door and say, we will not arrest you, but you have to inform on your boss, on your neighbor, on your friends, everybody you know. You will come once a week to our office and tell us what they are politically thinking and talking. We couldn't trust the mailman. We couldn't trust the electrician. We couldn't trust anybody who come to our house. We were afraid of our friends. We were afraid of our neighbors. I remember my parents, when they talked something politically, they whispered. You couldn't trust anybody because the Gestapo was everywhere. This way, they formed a network of informers. You informed on your neighbor, you informed on your friends. Well, last February, I was driving to the Capitol, and I listened to the morning news. And they said that President Obama said if somebody says anything derogatory against him, call the White House. The snitch program. Be careful. We also had gun control. We had to register our guns. All the government said guns are very unsafe, children are playing with guns, and there were many hunting accidents. And we also had murderers again. And the only way that they could track the murderers was by the serial number of the guns. Bring them to the police station. Everybody had to bring their gun to the police station so they could identify the serial number. Well, we were still law-abiding citizens, and we brought our guns to the police station, and they took down the serial number. Wasn't much longer that they said, no, it didn't work. We still had murderers, and they couldn't track them. The best way that we would have no more crimes and no more accidents, nobody would get hurt, bring the guns to the police station, and then we wouldn't have any more crime. They already know who had guns, and if you didn't bring your gun to the police station, capital punishment. I didn't see any heroes. Keep your guns and buy more guns. The fact is that in Switzerland, everybody has a gun. And the Swiss army, they keep all their equipment at home in the closet, ready to go. And that is why Hitler never tackled Switzerland. He tackled all the countries in Europe, and he did not tackle Switzerland. And Switzerland did not have a war for over 600 years and everybody still has a gun in their home. So keep your guns and buy more guns. Hitler was a very clever politician. He also nationalized our churches by developing a church tax. He said all those beautiful cathedrals cost a lot of money for upkeep and restoration, takes a lot of money, and not enough money is coming in on Sunday by donating to the money, putting money in the basket. We have to have a church tax. So when you paid your income tax, you paid an additional 2% church tax. That way he could control the priests and the ministers by taking the funding away. So everybody, the pastors and the priests, they were silent. Nobody complained because they would lose their funding. He also nationalized literally the news media. The newspaper was censored before they hit the street. So we had only one voice, the government radio and the newspaper, which was censored. We didn't know anything. The borders were being closed, nobody could get in and nobody could get out. We were sitting ducks. Dictatorship did not happen overnight. It took 5 years. 5 years, gradually escalate, little by little, step by step, from 1938 to 1945. After they took our guns away, we had total dictatorship. When the people fear the government, that's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's liberty. We have to take our country back. In 1985, I had the opportunity to be in Geneva at the summit conference between President Reagan and Premier Gorbachev. I had 2 missions. The American women were flying over there to support President Reagan. I had to accommodate them in the hotels and transportation and translation. And my other mission was to infiltrate the Communist Peace March. I went in disguise as a hippie. I looked really awful, really terrible, but I fit right in with them. I marched with the late Congresswoman Bella Abzug and Jesse Jackson and Barbara Boxer. And I would say it was a good, probably 2,000 people. And as we marched to the Hotel Hilton for the press conference, and I marched right in front with Bella Abzug, and Bella Abzug greeted a German woman there in fluent German. She spoke fluent German, and she said to the German woman, that German woman had a seat in the German parliament with the Green Party. You know, the green is the new red now in America. And she told her that she had a big surprise that they had a private meeting the next day with Premier Gorbachev. Well, since I could understand the language, I thought, how could this be that those 2 women could have a private meeting with a head of state, unless they were one of them. So I looked around the room, and there were about 8 or 10 other people there, and they were not at the Peace March. They were very disheveled, muddy boots, torn jackets, and one woman walked right up to me and she said, "Are you one of us?" And I looked at her, she looked at all my peace buttons, and I said, "Well, yes." And then she noticed that I had an accent and I could speak German. And when I said, "How come you were not at the Peace March?" she said, "Well, we came over the border illegal." And I said, "Why?" She said, "We are all members of the German Communist Party. And of course, Switzerland is very careful with their visa because Switzerland is very neutral." So I said, "Well, you are a member of the Communist Party." I said, what is your future goal?" She said, "Right now, we take Nicaragua." You know, the war was going on there. Then we take Honduras. There was also communist unrest there. Then we go to Mexico, meaning to spread their communist philosophy. I said, "Mexico is such a corrupt, poor country. Why would you go there?" She said, "That is our most important base." I said, "For what?" She said, "We want to take back the territory what the United States stole from us." And I said, "Well, this sounds to me like you are planning a little revolution. You need a lot of people." She laughed out loud and she said, "You Americans, you are so naive. Your churches are doing the work for us. The sanctuary movement. Bringing in the illegals, feeding them and housing them and looking for jobs." Well, I saw in our church bulletin that's what they were doing, and it struck me like a ton of bricks. I said to her, "Now, tell me, when is this going to happen? What are your plans?" Remember, that was 1985. She said, "That all depends who your president is. It can be 2004, but most likely 2008. Who is our president?" Well, I was down in New Mexico. The people are scared to death down there, and also in Arizona. They're literally stepping on a powder keg. I saw, I think it was after the inauguration, when the Mexican marched in Los Angeles, and they were carrying the Mexican flag, and they were trampling on the American flag. They're here. They're not all here for jobs. They're here for some other reason. I hope and pray that nothing terrible will happen before the election. But that is what they're planning, a revolution. There is no doubt about it. I am an optimist. God is still up there, and America is still a Christian nation. God did not forsake us in Austria when the Americans liberated us, and God will not forsake us that we take our country back as we know it. It is very, very important that we educate the public, that people will vote and vote for good candidates, that we can take our U.S. House back, and hopefully the Senate, that we can defeat the horrible health care bill and horrible other things would have been thrown at us. A little story on the more lighter side. When I arrived in the United States in New York, when I was processed by immigration, and then I went to my hotel, and I asked the concierge where the police station was. He said, a couple blocks down and one over. So I went to the police station, and I walked in and asked the sergeant, I want to register. He said, for what? Well, I was used to, in Austria, we had to have ID cards. You couldn't board a bus or a train without ID card, and you had to be registered wherever you want in 24 hours. So I want to register so that the government here knew where I was going to go, where I was going to live, so that they could find me. So I said again, I want to register. He said, you're pulling my leg. I said, I didn't even touch you. I didn't understand the slang. But anyhow, I wanted to register. He said, lady. I said, well, you have to, how would you find me? He said, lady, if you commit a crime, we find you. And I thought, how? I thought, this cannot happen. I walked out. It was a cold January morning, the blue sky. I looked up. What country is this? They don't want to even know where you're going to live. And they let you go anywhere you want to. I looked up to the sky, and it dawned on me, it's freedom. Thank you. Those of us who sailed past the Statue of Liberty, we came to a country of unbelievable freedom and unbelievable opportunity. America is the greatest country if we can keep it. God bless America. God bless you. Thank you.